Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I'm reviewing the Grand Seiko Heritage Spring Drive. Model is SBGA283. This watch is from my personal collection. It was purchased new, and I've owned it for approximately 8 months now. Grand Seiko started as a sub-brand of Seiko, and on older models, you'll actually see both the Seiko name and the Grand Seiko branding on the dial. In 2017, Grand Seiko became its own separate brand, and the watch dials were adjusted accordingly, such as this one. And now the brand operates by itself, essentially, in the luxury space. So with that little bit of history out of the way, let's go ahead and get some measurements. So in terms of, let's zoom out a bit. So in terms of what was listed online, the case diameter was described as 39 millimeters. So let's see what I get with my calipers. 38.9, so 39. Okay, I did not see a lug width listed, so can we get in between here? 19. Okay, that's an unusual one. And let's see, thickness online was listed as 12.3 meters. I'm getting 12.4. And lug-to-lug distance, as usual, I didn't see that listed online. So can we get a lug-to-lug here? About 46.6. Okay, and online this watch is listed as having 100 meters of water resistance. Looking at the face of this watch, one can see probably the first thing that's noticed is the champagne dial. It's been noted online that Grand Seiko actually does a pretty involved multi-step process to create and apply this in the sunburst fashion. I think it's something like a dozen steps. The hour markers are applied and are polished steel, and as is the Grand Seiko logo, which you can see here at the 12 o'clock position. The hands are also polished metal, and the hour and minute hands are in the dolphin style. There is a bordered date window that exists here at the 3 o'clock position. Above the 6 o'clock position, it says the notation that this is a spring drive watch. And then if you look flanking the 6 o'clock marker, that is where you see that it's made in Japan, and also the movement information, the model of the movement caliber. At approximately the 7 o'clock position is the power reserve indicator. While the hand that points on this, and you can kind of make that out here underneath the minute hand where I've got it positioned. Let me go ahead and actually do some rotation while I'm talking. That obviously, that marker, that indicator is applied just like any other hand would be. However, the power marker readings are actually just printed on the dial. And I note this because one of the chief complaints that a lot of people have had with the look of spring drive watches in particular has been that it's often a cutaway feature here. So there's like a textured drop in where the indicator sits, and to some it breaks up the symmetry of the plane of the dial. So on this model, it's interesting that they did not do that. They went with a print option. The watch does not feature any lume. The crystal itself is sapphire, and it does have anti-reflective coating on the inside, on the underside of the crystal. The case itself is stainless steel, and it consists of an interesting mix of brushed segments and highly polished sections, such as the sides here. You can kind of see the brushing on like the top of the lugs, for example. And it's got some planes going on here, little breakups of the dial as, from the bezel down to the case. So it's a blend of kind of curved shapes. The polished sections are, of course, the Grand Seiko famed Zarutsu polishing method. That actually is a method that comes from Europe, but Grand Seiko is exceedingly fond of it. And the result is you kind of get this almost black mirrored finish, a highly mirrored polish, which is one of the main selling points to a lot of people on the finishing of these watches. The crown is signed, as you can see, with the GS logo, and it is a screw down, and it features 4 positions. So when we were back screwed down here, as I was at the start, so in this current position, that's position 0, and so that's our maximum water resistance in this place where you're not supposed to do anything else. So if we unscrew the crown, it will pop out into position 1, and that's when this watch can be wound. Now, the winding sound is perhaps, in my view, best described as weird on this watch. It's not like a traditional mechanical watch. To me, it sounds like a really high-pitched whine, like you're manually pushing against a motor. If you've ever physically tried to move a motor that wasn't running, you kind of get this high-pitched whine. Anyway, that's to me what it sort of sounds like. I'll see if you can hear it while I wind it. at this time. I know some people worry that their watch is broken when they hear that. So I'm going to actually go skip past position 2 to go into position 3. The watch does feature hacking. So in position 3, the watch goes into hacking, and that's when you can actually set the time like you would with any other watch. And I'm not quite sure how near I was for the date changeover, and if this is one of those watches where we need to be cautious, but you can see it turned over there. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going around a bit to our famed let's record in 10:10 sort of time, because then you get a good view of all the hands. And then back in position 2 is the quick set for the date. Just counterclockwise turning on this. The watch itself has a closed case back. Let me go ahead and undo the clasp so you get a better view. You see the lion that's associated with Grand Seiko there. So you don't get to admire the spring drive on this watch because of that closed case back. The bracelet itself is the 3-link style. So you can see here, they've gone with the bulk of the bracelet is brushed. Like the major surfaces of the links are brushed. However, the sides of the links are polished. There is no micro adjust. The clasp is a 3-fold clasp. Sort of like that, with just a pretty standard push button release. As I noted, there's no micro adjust. You can see there are half links to give you some flexibility, but pretty disappointing in my view that there isn't actually micro adjust on this bracelet. This is what I would also say is confusing and annoying is the link system that this watch uses. So they look like screws. Well, and they are screws, but this isn't a traditional screw bracelet. This is some like hybrid model between the pin and collar system and the screw link system. And the way it works is there's a screw head here on each side of the link. And they're very, very short screws, like watchmaker screws. And in between those is a pin. So in my view, you've kind of got like the worst of both worlds combined here. So it's like you have the annoyance of having to deal with a pin like in a pin and collar system, but you've also got these super tiny screws that you have to mess around with to try and size things like you would with a screw link system. In terms of the watch movement, and kind of be made out, as I noted earlier here at the base of the dial, this is the spring drive caliber 9R65. So there's a lot to spring drive as I sigh, and I'm not going to launch into all of it, but to give you just a basic encapsulation if you're not familiar with it, spring drive is essentially hybrid technology between a mechanical watch and a quartz watch. And so spring drive watches do not use batteries or capacitors. They're not storing any electricity. The power, though, comes from the mainspring like it would with a mechanical watch. There is a quartz regulation to the movement. It's through a mechanism in the spring drive called the Tri-Synchro Regulator. And so as mechanical power is unleashed from the mainspring, it's used to generate electrical power essentially on the fly for that quartz to set the time. The Tri-Synchro Regulator also involves an electromagnetic power that functions as a brake. So the end result is you have a watch with quartz levels of accuracy, but mechanical drive. So the telltale sign that most people can easily do, even though obviously it says spring drive on the dial, but one of the things you can always do to know that you've got spring drive in play is you have a perfectly smooth second-hand sweep. It lacks the stutter of a mechanical watch because there's no stuttering from a pallet. So that's why it gets to be perfectly smooth. And you don't see the typical 1 second tick that you get in quartz watches, which is generally done because a quartz watch needs to have a very small battery and you're trying to maximize battery life and minimize power draw. So you don't want to constantly have the second hand running because it'll just drain your battery. So in this case, you don't have to worry about that because there is no battery. The mainspring's providing plenty of power to keep the second hand moving. In terms of the movement itself, the 9R65 is a 30 joule movement. It offers roughly 72 hours of power reserve when it's completely wound. And its accuracy rating is listed as plus or minus 15 seconds per month. So given how spring drive works, I can't actually test this watch's accuracy on my time grapher. But for my own personal use, having owned this watch for several months now, it does seem within the advertised standard. And here is a shot of the watch on my 6.75 inch wrist. So, what are my overall thoughts of this watch? I'd say it's got three main positives. It's got an attractive dial from the sunburst effect to the grammar of design philosophy, which is what Grand Seiko kind of refers to, the whole approach they take to their dials, from the indices to the polishing and the shapes that they employ. It's extremely accurate. Obviously, you're essentially getting not high accuracy quartz, but pretty standard quartz accuracy out of this hybrid spring drive movement. And the fascinating technology itself behind the spring drive. If you're into that, if you're into the technology behind watches, that's pretty cool. There are two notable negatives in my view. One is pretty minor, and that would be, I think it would have been nice to have a display caseback to see the spring drive movement. They do offer other watches with display casebacks with spring drive. So again, you can just pick a different model if that's a big deal to you, but you can appreciate the smooth second hand here still. So I don't think it obviously wasn't a major issue for my purchasing decision, but it would have been nice. Obviously you'd probably add a little bit of thickness doing that. I'd say the big negative, though, is the garbage tier bracelet. This watch, I think, retailed at $3,800. When I bought it, Grand Seiko listed it as an available model on their website, but at some point over the last few months, it appears to have been discontinued because I could not find it there anymore. And it looks like it's difficult to find them from the distributors as well. I started seeing a lot of out of stock notices. So this might be a watch you'd have to get used at this point. Maybe there are still some dealers that have them. I don't know. I don't have a lot of suggestions. This is in a way, I feel that this style of watch sort of competes in the Datejust space in terms of its features. And Grand Seiko has so many different other choices, but sort of sticking with this, I think they go with a more classical dressy design, even though this is still clearly in that sort of sports watch category, like a Datejust would be in terms of the water resistance and the steel bracelet and all of that. The garbage tier bracelet is so frustrating. It's not uncomfortable once you get it sized, but the non-micro adjust, the sizing is a huge pain. And I know that's usually a one-time thing, but it's extremely frustrating to work with those exceedingly tiny screws and the collars and trying not to lose any of them. That it's just something really worth noting. I think I've seen a number of people actually throw these watches on leather bands, maybe just to not have to deal with that. But there's this, for a watch that retailed for so far over $3,000, I really think they should have done a lot better with the bracelet. But that's really about it. Otherwise, I think the watch is an exceptional value for the price. I mean, you get a lot of really nice finishing, as you could see, from the Zaratsu polishing to just the quality of the workmanship behind the dial and everything in between. So thanks so much for watching this review video. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. It does help the channel out. And please subscribe to me if you'd like to be automatically notified when I release new videos. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.